We have some problems, but I think we have a good car, and I think we have a good engine too. We just have to work on these problems at this moment, which the team is doing. And for that, we have some modifications here at Ímola, hoping to improve part of the difficulties we have found so far.
I wasn't at the race, so I was watching it from home. Already quite a sombre feeling because of Roland Ratzenberger's death. It was then an enormous shock as we watched the events unfold during the race itself.
Senna was in the lead and was pacing the field as they went round behind the safety car following the start line accident. And the safety car on this occasion was a ludicrously slow Opel. You look at the speed they were traipsing around the circuit behind this little car, which I'm sure was being driven on the door handles, but it was so pathetically slow that all the Formula One cars were sort of struggling to run at that speed. But of course what happens is the tyres lost temperature running around behind the cars, and therefore the pressures as well, and which in effect changes the ride height.
At the restart, when Senna took the lead and Michael Schumacher was running behind him, here was the young pretender trying to dethrone the king of Formula One. And I'd done some things similar in a racing context, when you know you're putting the car you're following under pressure, and you're putting more and more and more pressure on that driver, and he knows you're doing it. And Senna was an intelligent man, he was a highly skilled man, he was a courageous man, a proud man.
There seems no doubt at all that what happened was the car bottomed out, and he essentially, when that happened, Ayrton Senna literally had no steering, and all he could do was stand on the brakes, which he did.
My immediate reaction was this is a big one, and then I very rapidly realised that it was a lot more than a big one by the body language and everything else that was coming out. And it was certainly the most difficult commentary job I ever had to do.
I remember standing there, and De Cesaris was in the car, and there was a TV monitor in the garage looking at the accident. And I remember standing there between the monitor and De Cesaris so that he couldn't see. Very sensitive guy, and just trying to protect him, really. But
I think everybody in the circuit and around the world is saddened by the harrowing events of today and this weekend. What are your feelings at this moment?
Certainly no good feelings. I mean, just win a race, but I can't feel satisfied. Can't feel happy. I mean, what happened this weekend, never have seen something like this. Not just one thing, so many things. The only thing I can say about this is I hope we learn from this.
Lots of pressures came to bear, I think, on Ayrton that weekend, and he was determined. He seemed very, very determined to not back off. Or even more so, perhaps, after Roland's accident. He had an Austrian flag secreted in his oval, so he was planning to win the race and display in honour of Roland should he win the race.
I remember it was Keke Rosberg that he came and he said, "Did you hear the news? What news?" And he said, "Oh, Ayrton died." Wow, I couldn't believe it.
yeah, just devastating. You know, the relationship I'd had with with Senna. You know, I mean, I've had some brilliant highs in the sport, the highs and the lows. You know, the lows don't get much lower than that. Just a shame, devastating.
I sort of grieved in private. I always grieve in private, whether it's a friend. You know, I don't believe that anyone could possibly think that his loss of losing his life didn't have a big negative impact on me. But I can't see why I have to demonstrate that to anybody.
There was an element, it must have been like when Jim Clark died, of if Jim Clark can die, because he's the best, anybody can die. And that's how it was for us. If Ayrton Senna, you know, can die with all of his skill and speed and talent, then we're all in trouble.
Professor Watkins told me, had the front wheel missed him when he hit the barrier and the front wheel came back into him and hit him on the helmet, had the wheel simply passed him by and not hit him, he said he didn't have a single other injury, not even a broken toe, nothing.
This is a weekend I'd for sure want to forget about. Right from the first moment with Rubens and his accident, and Roland yesterday, Ayrton today, the people in the pit lane. For me, a race you want to forget very quickly.
It was such a tragedy, obviously. From a personal point of view, I just feel very fortunate that I didn't have to be personally involved in the way that I know a lot of my previous colleagues at Williams had to do. So one of my main feelings was to feel for all of those people, particularly Patrick and Frank.
All kinds of theories were put forward, one of which, sadly for the Williams teams, was that the steering had failed. Remember, the steering column had failed, which was absolutely not the case, and was terribly upsetting to all members of the Williams team, not surprisingly.
I didn't have any doubts about doing the race. I was there to do a job, and I had communication with my engineers, and they were saying, we'd like you to, just as a precaution, not to run with the power steering. So I turned the power steering off. They didn't know what had caused this accident. They had data, they had graphs, and they had stuff they were looking back at in the garage, but they didn't actually know what had happened.
I was chief engineer of Benetton. Michael Schumacher was just behind him when he went off. First thing Michael said when he came in was, you know, we discussed it, and I'm sure I know what caused it. I'm 99% sure, and I'm sure that it's difficult to other people to understand how sure I am, because so few people ever spent their lives in a wind tunnel and know how unstable they can be and how bad they are if they're a bit too low.
Your worst fear as an engineer, honestly, and it's not so much in focus these days because the cars are so safe, but it was much more pointy back then, and people forget that. People still got injuries back then, and people died in racing cars. So as an engineer, you know, that was always in the back of your mind. That was your fear, that something that you designed might break and cause some sort of tragedy.
The changes after Imola, the right thing to have done was to say, okay, we are engineers, we are intelligent people, we do not want to suffer unnecessary fatalities or injuries. It's irresponsible to just turn a blind eye to it. So they did something about it. And Max Mosley pushed these changes through, much to everyone's frustration sometimes. But him and Charlie Whiting and Sid Watkins, they were going to get this done.